Good evening. I said at daily mass, somewhere in the last year, I mentioned that in my training as a homilist, we were taught to use self-disclosure discreetly. To use self-disclosure discreetly. I said, I've told you a number of things over the years about the Pacidi family, but there's things that I haven't told you, and I shouldn't tell you. I will have to bend that a little bit, the self-disclosure discreetly rule. Many of you know that my mother passed away this week. The funeral is going to be next Friday here at 11 o'clock. The funeral was put off because my younger brother had to have a surgery yesterday. So we wanted to put it off enough that he could be there. I thank all those who reached out, and I had mentioned some weeks before my mother was on hospice. I really am grateful for your prayers and for your thoughts and prayers in the recent weeks, and those of you who reached out since she passed. If you saw the Pastor's Corner this week, it talks about a video. Those of you who have smartphones or at least iPhones, you know how every now and then, like, a group of pictures will pop up. It kind of happens in the background. If there are settings for that on the phone, I don't really know where they're at. But anyway, there was a group of pictures about my mother that came up. Like it was perfectly timed. And they showed, and if you read the Pastor's Corner, they showed the pictures pretty much dated to the onset of the dementia that her and my father fell into around the same time. I'm going to say around 2017, probably. And from time to time, I've talked about that, dementia, and I've shared stories with a number of you. It's an excruciating illness. And it's an excruciating thing to watch. And when it's happening, it is so hard to focus on anything except what's being taken away. Precious memories, the loss of context. Towards the end, my mother, just for a moment, thank God, I would bring her, I would go over, and she was usually in a common area, and I would bring her into her little room, which my brother and sister-in-law have beautifully decorated, and she wouldn't recognize it. She wouldn't even recognize her own room. And I thought, wow, like how to be, like we so much rely on our consciousness of continuity with the constellation of relationships that define the people, the places, the things, and for all of that to be brand new every minute. Wow, it's a scary thing. The Pastor's Corner talks about, in now the broader context, now that she's gone, and this is one of the beautiful things we get to do as human beings. We get to reframe our lives as we move on in age and get new information and a broader perspective. Right? And as a people of faith, we reframe that with a particular perspective. All those times in your life, you say, oh, what's God thinking? What's God doing? Why did God allow this? Why did God allow that? That's one of the most vexing problems as a believer, right? Why? If God is love, does he allow all this? And you might say, geez, we call him Father, and I'm a parent, and I would never let this happen to my kids. Really vexing, really hard. From the Pastor's Corner. The video began with pictures of her during the earliest days of the disease. Like all of us, the slings and arrows of life carved wounds and a few hard edges into her being. My mother, like the rest of us, had her problems, had her issues, right? And you could see them early in the dementia, right? My mother tended towards being really nervous and struggled with anxiety and at times depression. As the years and the pictures roll on, the traces begin to fade, eventually disappearing entirely. In later years, she smiles more easily, laughs more heartily, and shares more freely. I have talked about this a little bit before, especially when my father died. My father, if those of you who knew my father, he was warm, he was personable, he's hard not to like, always joking, very social. He was a salesman. Had the temperament of a really good salesman. Hey, how you doing? He was a bit of a flirt. I think I've told you before. He would go down in the nursing home to the desk and say, no one told me they hired models here to work here. You have to be in your 90s to get away with that. When he passed away, we said, oh my gosh, like Elijah in the Old Testament and Elisha, who's his successor. And Elijah's about to go home, and he says to Elisha, what do you want? And Elisha says, I want a double portion of your spirit. I want a double portion of the gifts that you have, right? And my dad left, and my mother got a double portion instantly. And my mother, who was always kind of not the social one, she was the life of the memory unit. Hey, how you doing? And she would say openly to people, I love you. And she lost her fear of being alone. And as the pastor's quote relate, the traces of those things that she wore on her face all of her adulthood and early in the dementia, and you watch the pictures and you could see they're slowly fade. In later years, she smiles more easily, laughs more heartily, and shares more freely. By the end, she is at peace and fully welcomes going home. Again, now that she's gone, and well, let me read this from the Pastor's Corner. It says it better. While it was, of course, excruciating to watch her lose more and more of herself over these past few years, losing people, places, and treasured moments, the video allowed me to see what she gained. The changes God wrought in her as he prepared her for the journey home. Wow. Old hurts were forgotten and healed, allowing her to love and be loved in a way not possible before. And I pull all this back to the readings this week, especially the gospel. The church purposely puts in the middle of Lent, right past the middle point of Lent, what? The man who's blind, and his eyes are opened by Christ. And you've heard this application before, but it's right on, right? The broader thing that it speaks to is we're blind. We're blind. Everybody knows this. You know what I mean, right? You see things differently. We use the language too. I see it differently now that I'm older, right? I just told you I had an experience of I see it differently now that my mom's gone. I see the dementia. I see the heartache of the last 6 years. I see it differently. You've said that. Everybody said that. I see it now. I understand now. I perceive it now, right? To see things as God does, even a little bit, to begin to apprehend them the way that God does. is a beautiful thing and what we're made for. And what we're made for. And it brings this man, it doesn't just heal his vision, it heals his heart, it heals his spirit, and it brings him into deeper relationship with Christ and aligns him more with his mission. Pastor's Corner. If you haven't seen the movie Evan Almighty, Morgan Freeman plays God. What great casting. If you saw the movie, you know what Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, if you're old enough, remember, started with the silly roles on Sesame Street. Became a giant actor with a lot of gravitas. He plays God. There's a scene where Morgan Freeman's God says, let me ask you something. If someone prays for patience, do you think God gives them patience, or does he give them the opportunity to be patient? If he prayed for courage, does God give him courage, or does he give him opportunities to be courageous? If someone prayed for the family to be closer, do you think God zaps them with warm, fuzzy feelings, or does he give them opportunities to love each other? The only way we will recognize these opportunities and gain these virtues is if we begin to see as God sees and act as God acts. May we receive the grace today and every day to see and do just that, and in so doing, bring his light to the world. Amen.